Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Our first story of how an ordinary worker fired his boss. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. And our first story. Got my a-hole boss fired. This happened around 5 years ago at a transport company I used to work for. I was a forklift driver at the time and was responsible for loading our interstate trailer that was going to Brisbane from Sydney. I'd been doing this for about a year. I hadn't been at this place for long, and this place was massive. There were around 9 supervisors on the shift, so I had only worked under 2 supervisors who were pretty cool and would let me do what I was paid to do undisturbed. You see, I happen to be a great forklift driver. I know how to load a effing trailer. It's what I'm paid to do. It isn't very complicated, but not simple. Not everyone can load properly, though. Poor loading could lead to an accident. It's not complicated, but also not easy. So one day I walk into work, start my shift off like usual, and Mark, my supervisor at the time, finds me and tells me he got shifted to another area and I'll be working under B from now on. Yes, B. Everyone hated him so much we all called him B. I'd never worked with B before and it didn't really bother me. I thought maybe he would just leave me to do my job. I get to my trailer and after getting my forklift and what do you know, B is standing right next to it. He looks down at his watch, looks up at me, and starts shaking his head. "You're 5 minutes late," he calls out to me with an annoyed look on his face. As I was about to explain what happened, being stopped by my old supervisor, he cuts me off without a chance to explain and says, "Get off and open your trailer." I tell him no, I'm not a strapper, I'm a loader. Now for context, I'll explain. My trailer gets extremely busy, so I get my own personal strapper who stays with me. I could end up pushing out 15 B doubles by myself a night, so I have to be quick, which means I don't have time to strap my own trailer. This is done to ensure I can focus on staging my freight as well as loading it, since the bay where my pallets are put gets absolutely raped every night, so I have to make sure it stays clear. Back to the story, B repeats himself and proceeded to tell me he wasn't going to tell me again. Trying to lighten up the mood, I don't know why I thought it'd be funny, but I said to him, "Oh good, because I really don't want to fight with you about this. I'm glad you understood." He went red, his face lit up as he started cussing at me, calling me an effing idiot. He then demands I get off and strap my own trailer. I simply smiled and said, "Okay, sure, boss, but you're sure?" He replied in a fit, "Just effing do it." So I did it. I did exactly what he told me to do. When my strapper had shown up, I told him not to worry as I had been told to do it by B. He laughed and said, "Are you sure?" I said, "That's what I told him, but oh well." I intentionally took my time. It took me almost an hour to open that trailer and strap it. When he came back, he'd completely lost it at me. "What the F are you doing? This trailer should be finished." I smiled at him and said, "It is finished. I just finished strapping it." This sent him over the edge. He started abusing me and wasn't quiet about it. In the middle of him trying to destroy me, I keep saying, "But sir, you said to get off and strap my trailer. This trailer had no straps on it, so I had to put new ones on." He can see that management are watching us from the control tower. I'm pretty sure they're trying to radio him, asking what's going on, why the first trailer isn't out. This set every single delivery to Brisbane for that night over an hour late, and to make matters worse, cost the company buckets of money, paying drivers for the late departure and dropping our interstate rate of delivery dramatically. End of shift, I'm called up to the office with the union rep, managers, and B. Manager asks what the F happened. This hasn't happened in over a year. Why did things go south? B turns to boss and says with a smug look on his face, "Well, this guy seems to think he could take his time strapping his trailer." I couldn't help it. I effing laughed at him and turned to my union rep and asked if he needed me to stay here, and he says, "I can go," with a huge smile on his face. At this point, B is confused, starts asking what we're on about. My manager, who was noticeably PO'd at this point, couldn't even wait until I left. He looks at B and literally yells, "How many effing times did I tell you in the meeting? The interstate loader, under no circumstances, is to strap his own trailer." You see, this is an agreement set out by the union and company because Brisbane literally gets hammered every night. So because the workload for Brisbane is insane and no one wanted to do it before, you get your own person to help strap. It's a sackable offense for a supervisor to force a Brisbane loader to strap his trailer. I gave my rep a high five before he turns to my manager, NB, and says, "Well, manager, you know the agreement. Unless you want us to walk, I want him gone." That B-turd got what he deserved. He insisted I strap it. So I did it. I strapped him right out of a effing job. B-turd. And our last story. Old employer stole my hours, turned her in for Medicaid fraud. This story starts at about 7 or so years ago, but you'll need some background info first. After I graduated high school, I wasn't able to afford college, so I became a CNA at a nursing home. It was a crappy job, literally. I worked there for about 8 months before I left to work for a healthcare agency where I could make my own schedule and also work home care cases. Most of my patients were only allowed a home health aide temporarily while they recovered from surgery or an illness, or sometimes their insurance would only cover a few hours a day when they really needed much more. After several months, my agency called me about a patient that was disabled and approved for 9 hours a day every day. She was considered a permanent case as someone from the state would come twice a year to evaluate and authorize continuation of home services. I ended up working with this lady, Jerry, for about 2 years with the agency. She was a sweet woman, and although there was a generation gap, we got along great. She had a sister, Nancy, who was a self-proclaimed advocate for her sister, and her very handicapped daughter, Jessica. I always admired her because she was dealt a crap card with having to care for not only a sister, but a daughter who was unable to care for herself. We lived in New York State, and they had recently come out with this CDPAP program that would allow the family to appoint people as caregivers. They would then choose a healthcare agency to process the paychecks. It was nice because it allowed families to have more control over the care they received, and more importantly, you could get paid for taking care of your own family members. But there were limitations, one of which was that you couldn't get paid to work with your child. It had to be a sibling or some other kind of relationship. Nancy really liked me, and when she asked if I'd be willing to work with Jerry and Jessica under this program, I said heck yes. At the time, Jerry and Jessica lived in different places, but the family was able to get them Section 8 vouchers and move them to the same apartment building so the aides could do split shifts. With the amount of hours between the two of them, I was easily working a minimum of 40 hours a week. Then things changed. Nancy realized that she could get paid for literally doing nothing. The program is flawed in that the patient is approved for a certain amount of hours, and all you do is fill in weekly the sheets, print a schedule of when people are supposed to work, and return them to the agency that processes the paychecks. There's no way to prove that someone is actually there taking care of the person. At first, Nancy started filling out timesheets for herself whenever there were hours left over for the week, hours that no one worked. She could only claim these hours for Jerry, so she would fill out a timesheet for her son, saying that he worked with Jessica whenever she had leftover hours. Now, her son did actually help out from time to time, but not for all the hours she was claiming. Eventually, Nancy got greedy and started deliberately stealing hours from me and the other aides. It got so bad that she pushed us out by not scheduling us. I was struggling financially at the time, so this was devastating to me. My parents couldn't afford to send me to college, and here I was working my butt off so I could take a few community college classes and pay my bills. There had been some Medicaid cuts, so it wasn't like I could just find another patient. I was still technically employed at my old agency, and none of their offices had work because there just wasn't enough. Now on to the revenge. The second I realized what Nancy was doing, I started taking pictures of the weekly schedules and everyone's timesheets. Then once I stopped working there, I called up the Attorney General's Medicaid fraud unit and reported her. I explained the entire story, and for a while I didn't hear anything. Then I heard back from an investigator, and I gave him all the details he wanted. I had copies of schedules and timesheets to show that Nancy was pretending to schedule aides, but ultimately putting herself and her son on the timesheets. I also had another aide as a witness to back up all my claims. More months passed, and then I got a call saying that the CDPAP program was a gray area for them, and there wasn't much they could do because it's hard to prove cases like this. So I just let it go and forgot all about it. Then, almost 2 years ago, I got a call from the Attorney General's office, and it turns out the case was sent to another investigator and reopened. They wanted to meet with me and go over some evidence. It was over 3 years after I made the complaint, so many of these smaller details had been lost. Turns out they'd been spending the last few years building a case against the family, and they were nearly ready to go to court. And man, did they have a lot of evidence. Apparently, Nancy had forged my signature on timesheets to put hours that I had worked with Jerry under Jessica so she could claim all the hours for Jerry. Then she was filling out timesheets for her son, who wasn't working because he was away at college in a different state. She was just pocketing all the money for herself. I ended up moving across the country shortly after, so I had completely forgotten about this. Then last week, I randomly Googled Nancy's name and had a mini freakout when I read the news articles. Turns out that Nancy and her son were arrested a year ago and charged with a few felonies each. Nancy must have taken a deal because she pled guilty earlier this year to one of the felonies and was ordered to pay back over $100,000 that she stole from the state. She also got 5 years probation. Not only that, but it made the local news, and it's the first thing that comes up when you Google her name, which I've changed for the purpose of this story. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.